The Australian tractor attachment market is dominated by the same conversation every season. Which loader fits? Which slasher brand is on sale? Which post-hole digger is the best value? Meanwhile, independent workshop data and documented complaint patterns from Australian farming communities tell a different story about a specific category of attachments. The ones that fail structurally under Australian paddock conditions generate repair costs that exceed their purchase price within 2 seasons, or simply do not deliver the functional outcome their specification sheets promise. 7 of those attachments are examined here, followed by 5 that consistently deliver documented returns. We start with the attachment that generates the most consistent structural failure complaints in Australian conditions. In the first of 7 caution positions, the generic imported front-end loader without a relief valve, sold through agricultural merchandise chains and online platforms at prices between $1,800 and $3,200 Australian dollars, represents a category of attachment where the purchase price saving is consumed by hydraulic system repair costs within the first or second season of use on properties with any meaningful lifting demand. The relief valve is the component that protects both the loader's own hydraulic circuit and the tractor's main hydraulic system from pressure spikes generated when the loader hits a hard stop, a full bucket against a fixed obstacle, a quick drop onto uneven ground, or a fast crowd cycle on heavy material. Without a calibrated relief valve, those pressure spikes travel directly into the tractor's hydraulic pump and main circuit. Independent workshop data from regional Queensland and New South Wales workshops documents a consistent pattern of hydraulic pump seal failure on tractors operating generic loaders without relief valves, typically presenting at around 800 to 1,200 hours of combined loader use. A hydraulic pump reseal on a mid-range utility tractor costs approximately $380 to $460 Australian dollars through an independent workshop. A hydraulic pump replacement, where sealing failure has progressed to scoring of the pump body, costs approximately $900 to $1,300 Australian dollars. The generic loader that saved $1,200 Australian dollars at the point of purchase has, in the documented pattern, generated more than that in tractor hydraulic system repair within 2 working seasons. A correctly specified front-end loader from an established Australian market supplier, including the relief valve and a flow control system calibrated to the host tractor's hydraulic output, costs between $4,000 and $7,000 Australian dollars fitted. The difference between that figure and the generic alternative is, in documented workshop experience, almost entirely recovered in avoided hydraulic system repairs within the first 3 seasons of use. In the second caution position, the post-hole digger without a shear bolt or slip clutch safety mechanism, sold in the Australian market through budget implement dealers at between $900 and $1,800 Australian dollars, represents a PTO driveline risk that independent workshop discussions consistently flag as the highest cost per event attachment failure category in the compact and utility tractor segment. When an auger strikes subsurface rock, a routine occurrence on Australian properties with basalt, granite float, or shallow calcrete, the torque spike transmitted back through the PTO shaft either shears the intended sacrificial component or, in the absence of one, transmits to the tractor's PTO gearbox and driveline. PTO gearbox damage from a torque spike event on a mid-range utility tractor costs between $800 and $1,600 Australian dollars to repair through an independent workshop, depending on the degree of internal damage. Universal joint replacement in the PTO driveline following a torque spike typically adds $180 to $260 Australian dollars to the same bill. A post-hole digger with a properly specified slip clutch, calibrated to release before PTO driveline torque limits are exceeded, costs between $1,400 and $2,400 Australian dollars and avoids this failure mode entirely. In the third caution position, the light-duty slasher, built to a specification suited to European improved pasture, sold in Australia at between 800 and 1,600 Australian dollars in the 1.2 to 1.5 meter cut width range, fails structurally in a predictable and well-documented pattern when used on Australian hardwood regrowth, mulga scrub, and gorse infestations. The deck plate thickness and blade carrier design of budget specification slashers is calibrated for the stem diameter and impact load of temperate improved pasture work. Australian hardwood regrowth, particularly on Queensland and New South Wales properties, where mulga, ironbark, or box regrowth is the target vegetation, generates impact loads on the blade carrier and deck plate that are multiple times higher than the design specification of a light-duty machine. Deck plate cracking and blade carrier fracture, documented in farm tender community discussions from Queensland and NS Dollars operators, typically present within the first full season of use on this vegetation type. Repair costs for deck plate welding and blade carrier replacement on a light-duty slasher after a single season of mulga contact run between 400 and 800 Australian dollars through a local fabrication workshop, a significant proportion of the original purchase price, and a cost that recurs at approximately annual intervals for as long as the machine is used in the same vegetation conditions. A heavy-duty slasher with 8mm or heavier deck plate and a heavy blade carrier rated for timber contact costs between 2,800 and 4,500 Australian dollars in the 1.5 to 1.8 meter cut range. That cost differential against the budget alternative is typically recovered in avoided structural repairs and avoided downtime within 2 to 3 seasons of use on the vegetation types that generated the documented failure pattern. In the fourth caution position, the generic 3-point linkage post driver without a hydraulic dampener, sold between 2,000 and 3,400 Australian dollars in the Australian market, generates a specific failure mode in rocky or variable depth soil conditions that independent workshop records from southern Queensland and Victoria document consistently. The hydraulic dampener absorbs the shock of a post encountering subsurface resistance before the drive head reaches the specified set depth, a situation that, on Australian properties with mixed soil profiles, buried rock, or compressed subsoil layers, is routine rather than exceptional. Without the dampener, the shock load transmits to the 3-point linkage and the tractor's rear axle and differential housing. Rear axle seal damage following repeated post-driving shock events presents at around 500 to 800 hours of combined operation on rocky ground, with a reseal cost of approximately 240 to 290 Australian dollars. A post driver with a correctly specified hydraulic dampener costs between 3,200 and 4,800 Australian dollars. The structural difference between the two specifications is not visible on a spec sheet comparison and is not obvious on a dealer forecourt. It becomes obvious in the second season. In the fifth caution position, the undersized grain auger, sold in the Australian market at prices between 1,400 and 2,200 Australian dollars for the 7 to 8 meter, 6-inch tube range, represents a false economy for any property running a combine harvester with an unloading rate that exceeds the auger's peak throughput. When an auger is operated continuously at or above its throughput limit, a condition that occurs whenever it is paired with a harvester that delivers grain at a rate higher than the auger can clear, the flighting, bearings, and drive gearbox operate under sustained overload. Bearing failure under sustained overload on a budget specification grain auger presents at around 2 to 300 hours of peak season use, with bearing replacement costing approximately 160 to 220 Australian dollars per event. Flighting replacement following sustained overload wear runs between 600 and 1,000 Australian dollars, depending on tube length. A correctly sized grain auger, matched to the actual peak unloading rate of the harvester it services, costs more at purchase and runs within its design limits across the full season. In the sixth caution position, the imported round bale spear, without a rated load certification, available in the Australian market between 180 and 320 Australian dollars, creates a specific safety and cost risk that farm tender community discussions flag with consistent regularity. A round bale of Rhodes grass, oaten hay, or silage in Australian conditions weighs between 300 and 600 kilograms, depending on the crop, moisture content, and roll density. A load-rated bale spear from an established Australian market manufacturer costs between 380 and 560 Australian dollars and carries a documented load rating. The unrated import carries no such documentation. When a spear fails under load, through weld fracture at the mounting plate, taper fracture mid-spear, or quick hitch interface failure, the load drops without warning. The cost of a dropped bale event ranges from a bent or broken rear linkage component at approximately 340 to 480 Australian dollars to a more significant structural event if the failure occurs in a confined space or on a slope. This is a cost and safety risk that a $300 price difference resolves entirely. In the 7th caution position, the cheap imported Ripper subsoiler without hardened wear plates, sold between 900 and 1,600 Australian dollars in the single and two-leg configuration, wears through its working life in fewer than 200 hours in the hard, abrasive soils of the Western Australian and South Australian grain belt, generating a replacement tine and point cost that approaches the purchase price of the original implement within the first or second season. A correctly specified subsoiler with hardened, replaceable wear plates and tungsten carbide point inserts costs between 2,200 and 3,400 Australian dollars for the equivalent working configuration. The wear life of a tungsten carbide point in hard WA or SA cereal soils is approximately 3 to 5 times that of a standard cast point. And the replacement cost, approximately 80 to 120 Australian dollars per point, is lower than the cost of the full tine assemblies that budget specification subsoilers require when their non-replaceable points wear flush with the leg. With the 7 caution positions established, the case shifts entirely. 5 attachments deliver documented financial returns in the Australian farming context, and the first of them starts where most implement purchases end up anyway. In 5th place among the recommended attachments, the quick hitch, specifically the Euro Standard or Top Link quick hitch, compatible with the tractor's 3-point linkage category, delivers a return on investment that is measured not in yield or fuel, but in time. An independent workshop assessment of implement change time on a property running 4 to 6 different rear attachments across a mixed season, cultivator, slasher, post-hole digger, bale spear, spray boom, seeder, places the average manual 3-point linkage coupling time at 12 to 18 minutes per implement change, including alignment, pin insertion, and top link adjustment. A quick hitch reduces that time to approximately 2 to 4 minutes for a practiced operator. Over a full season on a mixed property, the accumulated time saving from a quick hitch is commonly cited in farm tender community discussions as 4 to 8 hours of operator time across implement changes. At an owner-operator labor cost of 40 to 60 Australian dollars per hour, the quick hitch, costing between 350 and 600 Australian dollars fitted for a Category 2 linkage, pays for itself within a single season on any property with regular implement rotation. In 4th place among the recommended attachments, the heavy-duty slasher, built to an 8mm or heavier deck specification, already referenced in the caution section, delivers its return in the Australian context not through fuel efficiency or precision, but through the simple absence of the structural failure costs that document the light-duty alternative. For any property carrying mulga, ironbark regrowth, gorse, blackberry, or dense native shrub cover, a heavy-duty slasher is not an upgrade. It is the correct specification for the application. A machine costing between 3,000 and 4,500 Australian dollars that runs a full season without a structural repair delivers a lower total cost of operation than a budget alternative at 1,200 Australian dollars that requires 400 to 800 Australian dollars in repairs at the end of the same season. In third place among the recommended attachments, the 4-in-1 bucket, a front-end loader bucket configuration that combines a standard bucket, a clamshell grab, a grading blade, and a dozer push function in a single attachment through the action of a hydraulically operated clamshell jaw. Delivers documented versatility on mixed Australian properties that its price premium over a standard bucket is rarely able to match on a total implement cost basis. A 4-in-1 bucket costs between 1,600 and 2,800 Australian dollars more than an equivalent standard bucket. A property that would otherwise require a separate bale grab, a standard bucket, and an occasional hire of a greater blade function pays for that premium through avoided attachment purchases within the first or second season of mixed use. Farm tender listings consistently show 4-in-1 buckets, retaining strong resale value relative to standard buckets, reflecting their recognized versatility in the second-hand Australian implement market. In second place, among the recommended attachments, the heavy-duty hydraulic post driver with a correctly specified dampener, already referenced in the caution section, delivers returns on mixed livestock and cropping properties that the budget alternative cannot approach on total cost of operation. For any property running a regular fencing program across rocky or variable depth ground, the dampener is not optional equipment. It is the component that protects the tractor's rear axle and linkage from the shock events that define the Australian post-driving environment. The cost difference between a budget post driver and a correctly specified heavy-duty alternative with a dampener is recovered in avoided rear axle repair within the first 2 to 3 seasons on rocky ground, in most cases documented in independent workshop records. And finally, in first place among the recommended attachments, the basic GPS auto steer system, positioned specifically and exclusively for commercial scale grain, cotton, and mixed cropping operations where paddock areas and seasonal input costs justify the return on investment calculation. Delivers documented financial returns in the Australian broadacre context that no other single attachment on this list approaches. For commercial scale operations, the return on investment from basic GPS auto steer, in fuel, seed, and overlap savings, is well documented. An entry-level GPS auto steer system fitted to an existing tractor costs between 4,500 and 9,000 Australian dollars installed, depending on the guidance system specification and the tractor's existing hardware compatibility. The documented ROI calculation for a commercial broadacre grain property running 100 to 200 hectares or more of crop per season is straightforward. Seed overlap reduction from auto steer guidance on a 12-meter seeder, conservatively estimated at 3 to 5% of seeded area, translates to approximately 120 to 400 kilograms of seed per 100 hectares saved per season at commercial seeding rates. Fertilizer application overlap reduction on the same pass saves a comparable proportion of input cost. Fuel savings from straighter passes and reduced headland turns on large paddocks are consistently reported in broadacre operator discussions on farm tender community at between 4 and 8% of total seasonal fuel consumption. Combined across a full commercial season, an entry-level auto steer system recovers its installation cost within 2 to 4 seasons on operations of the scale where the technology is recommended here. This ROI calculation does not transfer to small-scale or hobby farm operations, where paddock size, input volumes, and seasonal pass counts reduce the savings below the level required to justify the installation cost. A distinction that this channel addresses specifically in content aimed at the hobby farm segment. Across all 12 attachments examined in this countdown, one truth stands out. The attachment that costs least on the invoice is not the attachment that costs least on the property. The gap between what an implement costs at the point of purchase and what it costs across a working season in Australian conditions is where the real implement budget is decided, not in a catalog or on a dealer forecourt. If this breakdown changed the way you approach the next implement purchase on your own operation, hit subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who is currently shopping for any of the attachments on this list. Tell us in the comments which attachment has cost you more than it should have, and whether the failure mode matched what we described.